There are a number of things that we should consider when we're trying to think about which symbols we're going to use to teach students. For example, we need to have some understanding of what a student knows about communication. Does the student currently have an intentional means of communication using behaviors, gestures, speech, or other forms of symbolic language? Is the student still pre-intentional in his or her communication? For example, does the child smile to express pleasure or cry to express discomfort without quite understanding that smiling or crying are ways to communicate with others? Answers to questions like these guide the selection of symbols. It is also helpful to have some information regarding the student's receptive understanding of words and language in general. Receptive language understanding is not a prerequisite to the introduction of symbols. In fact, we can teach and support receptive language through the use of symbols. However, the decisions we make about which symbols to use could be influenced by a student's receptive vocabulary understanding. For example, we may choose symbols that represent concrete objects that we can help the student associate directly with the symbol, if we know that the student's receptive language is very limited. Similarly, we may choose symbols that reflect actions and activities that we can engage in with the student so that we can link the symbol with that action or activity rather than linking it only to a spoken word. In contrast, a student who has stronger receptive language skills can map new symbols onto known words without requiring the same level of physical interaction with an object, an action, or an activity. Information about the student's prior experience with symbols is also helpful. You might ask questions such as, has the student had meaningful opportunities to use symbols to communicate and interact with others? Has the student's experience with symbols been limited to mass trials focused on identifying or labeling the symbols? Has the student been in an environment where adults have intentionally modeled the use of symbols for communication in an ongoing way? If the student has had lots of exposure to symbols in non-communicative contexts, it may be that instruction must focus on correcting the misunderstandings that have been taught over time. If we want students to learn to use symbols to communicate and interact, we must provide them with extensive modeling of their use across contexts and purposes for communication. We can't lead them to believe that the goal is merely matching or identifying symbols when asked. Understanding the types of activities, people, and interactions that are most engaging for a student also influences our selection of symbols. Often, educators choose to start with symbols that represent basic functions like eat, drink, and bathroom. Unfortunately, these are rarely the things that have the most communicative value to beginning communicators. The truth is that most students with significant disabilities have had several years of learning that someone is going to get them something to eat and drink and take them to the bathroom. As a result, the reinforcing value of those types of symbols is pretty limited. Instead, we might choose a symbol that represents a favorite activity, object, or person. Even when we think we've selected symbols with reinforcing value, we have to model the use of the symbols and teach their meaning over time. We have to consider how much support is provided for symbol learning and use. We can't teach students to understand and use symbols in 1 or 2 sessions per week. Instead, the team must decide they are going to teach the meaning and use of symbols for communication and commit to modeling their use throughout the day. If there is only one person doing work on the symbols, it will be very difficult for the student to learn what the symbols represent and how they are used to communicate. We want to make sure that the setting offers multiple and varied opportunities for the student to learn and use the symbols that we're introducing. Across the day, the whole team must intentionally model the use of symbols and find opportunities to use and incorporate the symbols into their interactions with students. Each one of these things makes a difference in how quickly the student may come to understand symbols and choose to use them to communicate.